Just because he hasn't said, "I'm sorry," or reached out with a grand gesture, doesn't mean he doesn't regret losing you. That's the thing about regret. It rarely shows up in the way we expect it to. We imagine it coming in the form of a long message, a late night phone call, or someone showing up at our door saying, "I made a mistake." But more often than not, regret is quieter. It lives in the moments he doesn't talk about, in the way he scrolls through your old messages but never hits send. In the nights where something reminds him of you, but pride tells him to push it down and pretend it doesn't matter. See, for some people, regret is tied up in ego. Admitting they messed up means facing the truth that they let go of something rare, and that truth is heavy. So instead of leaning into that vulnerability, they choose silence. They choose distance, not because they don't feel anything, but because they feel too much and don't know how to handle it. Their pride becomes a mask they hide behind. He might be telling himself stories to feel better. She was too much. It wouldn't have worked anyway. I needed space. These are all just narratives we create when we don't want to confront the actual pain of loss. Because to say, "I regret losing her," is to say, "I didn't appreciate what I had when I had it." And for someone whose ego can't handle being wrong, that's a hard pill to swallow. But here's what's important for you to remember. His inability to express that regret doesn't make your worth any less real. Don't confuse his silence for apathy. And don't take his lack of ownership as a reflection of your value. You showed up, you loved, you gave. If he couldn't meet you there, if he couldn't recognize what was in front of him, that's on him. That's his regret to carry, not yours. And I know part of you might still be waiting for that apology, that message that says, "I get it now. I see what I lost." But that's the trap, isn't it? Waiting for someone else to validate what you already know. You don't need his regret to justify how special what you brought to the table was. You don't need his voice to echo what your heart already understands. Regret is his to wrestle with. Closure, though, that's yours too. Create. What often happens when someone regrets losing you but can't admit it is they act out in subtle, confusing ways. You might notice him suddenly watching your stories, liking your posts, or asking mutual friends how you're doing. But when you reach out, there's no real accountability, just vague conversation, just enough to remind you he's still there, but never enough to take responsibility. That's not connection. That's ego management. That's him saying, "I still want a piece of your energy," without giving you the respect of emotional honesty. And you deserve more than that. You deserve someone who doesn't need to lose you to understand your value. Someone whose pride doesn't outrank their love. Someone who shows up not when it's convenient, not when they're lonely, but consistently, courageously, and clearly. The truth is, people don't always get the timing right. Sometimes it takes losing someone to realize what they had. But timing isn't just about fate. It's about readiness. It's about maturity. And if he wasn't willing to face his ego when you were right there offering something real, then his regret, no matter how deep, doesn't entitle him to a second chance. Regret is a mirror, not a map. It can show you where you went wrong, but it doesn't automatically guide you back to what you lost. If he's still stuck in that mirror, staring at what he gave up but refusing to move, that's where he'll stay, watching, wishing, wondering. Meanwhile, you move forward, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've already proven everything you needed to. You were ready. You showed love. You set a standard. And now you continue walking towards someone who won't make you question your worth just because they're at war with their own. He may regret losing you, but his ego won't let him say it. And that's not your burden to bear. His ego is a shield. That's the truth most people miss. It's not that he doesn't feel anything. It's that he doesn't want to feel exposed. Vulnerability is terrifying when you've built your identity around control, strength, and always being the one who's fine. So instead of reaching out and saying, "I messed up," or "I miss you," he buries those feelings under layers of denial, Pride becomes the armor he wears to protect himself from the discomfort of regret. And here's the thing about ego. It doesn't just protect us from pain, it also keeps us from growth. It whispers, "You're right. She expected too much. She overreacted." Not because those things are true, but because it's easier than saying, "I wasn't enough. I didn't give enough. I lost someone who actually cared." That's a hard pill to swallow. It requires humility, and not everyone is ready to go there. You see, for some people, admitting they lost someone valuable feels like failure. So instead, they rewrite the story. They convince themselves it wasn't that serious, that the relationship was flawed anyway, that maybe you weren't the right person for them. But deep down, they feel the absence. It shows up when they go to the restaurant you both loved, when they hear your favorite song, when something funny happens, and for a split second they think to send it to you and then remember you're no longer there. But instead of using those moments as a catalyst for honesty, they tighten their grip on ego. They scroll past your photos, pretending not to care. They don't like, they don't comment, but they're there, watching. Because regret doesn't always show up in grand gestures. Sometimes it looks like silence, like hesitations, like disappearing and reappearing, hoping you'll still be orbiting around their world without them having to ask. And you might be tempted to take that silence personally, to think, if he truly regretted it, he'd tell me, he'd reach out, he'd fight for me. But not everyone has the emotional language or courage to do that. Some people were raised to believe that emotions are weakness, that apologies make you lose power, that vulnerability is dangerous. So instead of saying, "I'm sorry," they say nothing and hope their absence makes you question your worth. But you can't let someone's emotional limitations become your emotional prison. If someone's ego is so inflated that it can't make room for honesty, don't shrink yourself to fit inside it. The moment you start interpreting their silence as a measure of your value is the moment you give away your power. And trust me, your power doesn't lie in being chosen by someone who can't even admit they miss you. Your power lies in knowing that you showed up with love, with integrity, and with heart. And that their inability to meet you there says everything about them and nothing about you. Because when someone lets their ego run the show, they think they're winning. They think they're staying strong. But what they're really doing is losing. Losing the chance to repair, losing the chance to connect, losing someone who saw them, really saw them, and loved them anyway. And that kind of love, that's rare. That's not something you find every day. But they'll tell themselves they can, that someone else will come along, that maybe the next person won't ask them to grow. But here's the hard truth. It's not about finding someone else. It's about becoming someone else. And until they're willing to evolve, until they're willing to confront their ego and ask, what part did I play in this loss? They'll keep repeating the same patterns with different people in different relationships, wondering why nothing sticks. And maybe, just maybe, months from now, years from now, they'll realize. They'll look back and think, she was right there. She loved me. She challenged me. She asked me to be more. But by then, you'll be long gone. Not because you're bitter. Not because you're punishing them, but because you've grown, you've healed. You've realized that someone who can't put down their ego for love isn't someone who can hold space for the kind of connection you deserve. So if you're sitting in silence right now, wondering if he regrets losing you, the answer might be yes, but he's too busy protecting his pride to show it. And that's not love. That's fear. And you're not here to be someone's almost. You're not here to wait in the shadows of someone else's emotional growth. You're here for real, open, courageous love. Let him regret it. You rise. He might not be saying, "I miss you." He might not be picking up the phone and calling you, pouring his heart out, or sending you a long text with an apology. But don't be bitter. Not because you're punishing them, but because you've grown, you've healed. You've realized that someone who can't put down their ego for love isn't someone who can hold space for the kind of connection you deserve. So if you're sitting in silence right now, wondering if he regrets losing you, the answer might be yes, but he's too busy protecting his pride to show it. And that's not love. That's fear. And you're not here to be someone's almost. You're not here to wait in the shadows of someone else's emotional growth. You're here for real, open, courageous love. Let him regret it. You rise. He might not be saying, "I miss you." He might not be picking up the phone and calling you, pouring his heart out, or sending you a long text with an apology. But don't be fooled into thinking that means he doesn't feel something. Regret has a funny way of showing up, not in the ways we expect, but in subtle behaviors. That's why I always say, don't just listen for words, watch actions. When someone regrets losing you, but is too proud to admit it, they don't always go radio silent. In fact, sometimes they stick around in the background. You'll see them watching your Instagram stories. You'll notice their name pop up, liking a photo they didn't have the courage to comment on. They might send a random message at 10:37 p.m. saying, "Hey, just saw this and thought of you," with no context and no follow-up. Or they'll text you on your birthday when they've been absent the entire year, and you sit there wondering, what is this? Why reach out but not actually say anything meaningful? Because it's not about reconnecting. It's about staying relevant in your mind. It's about not fully letting go. That's what ego does. It wants to have one foot in without being vulnerable. It wants to feel like it still could have you, even if it doesn't actually want to put in the effort to earn you. It's this dance between silence and subtle signs. And it's easy to misinterpret that. You might see a like or a DM and think, he's still thinking of me. Maybe he wants me back. But wanting you and being ready for you are two very different things. He might be sitting there thinking, damn, I let a good one go. But that doesn't mean he's ready to be the partner you deserve. This is where a lot of people get stuck. They think, if he regrets it, maybe I should wait. Maybe I should reach out. But here's the hard truth. If he truly regrets losing you and is ready to own that, he'll do more than leave breadcrumbs. He'll come back with humility, with clarity, and with action. Anything less than that is just ego trying to keep its options open while doing the bare minimum. When you see these half measures, these story views, these likes, these random messages, you have to ask yourself, what's not being said here? Because what's not being said is everything. It's the apology that never came. It's the vulnerability he's too scared to express. It's the acknowledgement that he messed up, but he's not strong enough to face what that means. And if he's not strong enough to say that, then he's not strong enough for a real relationship. I've seen people waste months trying to decode the behavior of someone who lost them and couldn't admit they were wrong. They overanalyze every message, every social media move, every moment of attention. But let me say this clearly, attention is not affection. And regret without change is just self-pity. It might soothe his ego to know he's still on your mind, but what is it doing to your self-worth? You don't need someone who circles around you without ever stepping forward. You don't need someone who dips in and out of your life like it's a revolving door. If he regrets losing you, let him. That regret belongs to him. It's not your responsibility to make it easier for him. It's not your role to decode his silence or his signals. That's what ego wants, you to fill in the blanks because it's too afraid to speak the truth out loud. But here's the beauty in all of this. The longer you go without chasing, without responding to crumbs, without playing the game, the louder the silence becomes for him. And that's when the regret gets real. Because when you show that you've moved on, not out of bitterness, but out of growth, that's when he starts to realize what he actually lost. Not someone who is waiting in the wings, but someone who evolved without him. So if you're seeing these signs, don't confuse them for progress. Don't romanticize a man's inability to express remorse. Regret might be there, but it's meaningless if it never turns into action. You deserve someone who chooses vulnerability over pride. Someone who doesn't just regret losing you, they fight not to lose you in the first place. You don't need to chase clarity. His silence is your answer. It's not your job to compete with his ego. See, this is the trap so many people fall into after a breakup, especially when there's no closure. When someone walks away without truly acknowledging the damage they caused, without accountability, and worst of all, without remorse. And suddenly you're left wondering if you were ever valued at all. You begin to think, maybe if I say the right thing, show him how much I cared, prove my worth one more time, maybe then he'll finally see what he lost. But here's the truth. The moment you start trying to win against someone's ego, you've already started to lose. Because ego isn't interested in truth, in healing, or in love. Ego is only interested in self-protection. It's not a fair opponent. It plays dirty. When someone's ego is running the show, they won't let themselves admit they messed up. They won't say, I hurt you. I let something beautiful slip away. Even if they know it deep down, they'll do everything they can to avoid saying it out loud. Because the moment they do, they're vulnerable, they're exposed, and to them, that feels like weakness. And so instead of reaching out, they'll convince themselves you are the problem. They'll rewrite the story so they can be the hero in their own narrative. They'll distract themselves, jump into another relationship, double down on their independence, or worse, start acting like you didn't matter at all. But all of that, it's performance, it's ego posturing, it's fear of confronting the reality that they lost something good, something real, and they weren't brave enough to fight for it. And if you're not careful, you'll internalize that performance. You'll start to feel like you weren't enough, like you should have done more, like you are the one who needs to prove something. But I want you to hear this. You were not supposed to battle someone for the right to be seen. You were not supposed to shrink just to make their ego feel bigger. And you were not supposed to wait around hoping they'd one day choose humility over pride. Because love isn't about pride. Love is about presence. It's about showing up. It's about saying, I hurt you, and I own that. It's about risking embarrassment, risking rejection, risking ego for the sake of connection. If he can't do that, if he can't lower the wall enough to say, I regret how I treated you, you meant more to me than I showed, or even just, I miss you, then he's not ready for the kind of relationship you deserve. Full stop. You can't keep dancing with someone who's married to their ego, because ego doesn't apologize. Ego doesn't grow. Ego doesn't heal relationships. It destroys them. And when you choose to stay in that dynamic, when you try to make it work despite the pride, the silence, the emotional unavailability, you're really just telling your own heart, his comfort matters more than my peace. But it doesn't. Your peace matters. Your dignity matters. Your self-respect matters. You don't need to hear him say, I regret losing you, to know your value. You don't need an apology to validate what you felt was real. His regret, silent or not, doesn't define your worth. And maybe, just maybe, he does regret it. Maybe he thinks about you more than he admits. Maybe he lies in bed some nights wondering what might have been. Maybe every time he sees someone who reminds him of you, there's a pang of something unspoken. But if that regret never reaches you, if it stays locked behind pride, then what good does it do you? None. You can't grow with someone who only looks backward in secret. You can't build love on ego. You can only build love on honesty, vulnerability, and action. So no, don't wait for him to admit it. Don't compete with his pride. Don't fight to be chosen by someone who's too afraid to say, I was wrong. Let his ego be his burden, not yours. Because the moment you stop trying to earn his regret, is the moment you reclaim your power. Sometimes regret comes too late. And that's the hard truth a lot of people don't want to face, especially when you're on the receiving end of that regret. You can feel it in the way he looks at you when you bump into him months later. You can sense it in the awkward text he sends after weeks of silence. You might even hear it in the way mutual friends talk about how he's not really been the same since you left. But here's the thing. By the time he realizes what he lost, you may already be long gone. It's easy to romanticize this moment. We've seen it in movies. The person who didn't appreciate you when they had you finally wakes up, makes a grand gesture and wins you back. But real life doesn't always play out that way. In fact, what's more common is that the regret surfaces quietly, inconveniently, and far too late. And that's not your fault. See, when someone loses you, especially someone who let their ego dominate the relationship, they often don't feel the regret immediately. At first, they might feel relief, even power. They'll convince themselves that they're better off without you, that they made the right choice, that they can do better. Their ego fuels that narrative. It gives them something to hold on to. But with time, when the distractions fade and reality sets in, the truth starts to creep in. And that's when regret shows up, quietly, humbling, and often too late to do anything about it. You know what's painful? Being the person who sees the potential in someone, who gives their all, and who walks away, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally realized the love was one-sided. And when you've done the hard work to walk away from someone who couldn't meet you where you were, the last thing you deserve is to be dragged back by someone who now regrets but still can't offer what you needed when it mattered most. Regret is not the same as change. Don't confuse the two. A man might regret losing you, but that doesn't mean he's grown. That doesn't mean he's now magically capable of being the partner you deserved. Sometimes people regret losing you simply because they miss the feeling of being loved by someone like you. They miss the comfort, the validation, the energy you brought into their life. But missing that isn't the same as being ready to reciprocate it. There's a big difference between missing you and being ready for you. Don't let someone's delayed realization make you forget all the nights you waited for that appreciation when you were still in their life. If someone regrets losing you but never showed they valued you while they had you, you owe it to yourself to keep walking forward. Don't let their regret become a chain that pulls you back into a dynamic you worked so hard to grow out of. I know it's tempting. I know that part of you wants to hear those words, "I made a mistake." And maybe one day you will. Maybe he'll come back and say everything you always wanted to hear, but by then you'll be different, stronger, wiser, calmer. And maybe you won't feel what you thought you would, because the person you were when you loved him isn't the same person you are now. Growth has a way of making you outgrow the people who couldn't appreciate you. That's not a tragedy, it's progress. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is not showing up, because their absence creates space for clarity. Their silence creates room for strength. Their ego creates the distance you need to finally see that the love you were giving away so freely is the same love you deserve to give to someone who meets you with it. So yes, he may regret it. He may think about you late at night. He may wish he could rewind the clock, but your life isn't on pause, waiting for someone else's realization. Your life is moving forward. And the most powerful thing you can do is keep moving with it, because sometimes regret comes too late. And by the time he finally realizes what he lost, you'll already be gone. You were the wake-up call. And that's something most people don't even realize they were until much later. You see, when someone walks away from a good thing, when they let go of a person who brought love, presence, empathy, and real connection into their life, it creates a rupture. It creates a void. But here's what's tricky. Most people don't acknowledge that void right away. Their ego kicks in. they rationalize, they tell themselves they didn't care that much, or that it wasn't working anyway, or that they're better off. They try to fill that silence with noise, distractions, rebounds, validation from other people. But it doesn't quite land the same. Why? Because deep down, they know they lost something real. That moment of losing you, it stung. Even if he pretended otherwise, even if he was stoic, cold, or even smug about it, he might have walked away with his head high. But nights hit differently when he's alone with his thoughts. That quiet space where no one's watching, that's where the truth creeps in. That's where he replays your words, your smile, your support, the way you understood him, the way you made him feel safe, even when he didn't know how to articulate it. And it hits him not just that you're gone, but why you're gone. And more importantly, that he's the reason. But the ego is clever. It doesn't like to be wrong. It doesn't like to admit that it pushed away someone valuable. So instead of taking accountability, he might bury it, pretend he's fine, maybe even try to make you look like the one who messed up. That's easier than facing his own reflection and saying, I had something good and I blew it. It's easier than admitting he didn't show up, didn't communicate, didn't grow. Still, even as he walks around acting unbothered, there's something inside him that knows. You see it in the random message he sends weeks or months later, just a, hey, have you been? Or some vague excuse to reach out. You see it in how he watches your stories but never replies. You hear about it through mutual friends. He asks about you, but won't reach out directly. Because if he does, he risks looking weak. He risks being vulnerable. And for someone whose ego has been in the driver's seat for a long time, that's a terrifying prospect. But here's where your power lies. You were never supposed to fix that. You were never meant to battle his ego for a place in his life. You were the mirror. You were the standard. You were the moment in his life that showed him what genuine love, attention, and care actually looked like. And losing you, that was the consequence of him not being ready to meet you there. And maybe, just maybe, you were the first person who ever held him to a higher standard. Maybe everyone before you accepted crumbs. And you were the first one to say, no, this isn't enough. That's not rejection. That's transformation. Because now, every time he meets someone new, he carries the memory of you. Not in some desperate romanticized way, but as a reference point, as a standard he failed to meet. And that burns. That lingers. He might try to replace you. He might try to numb the regret. But nothing sticks the same. Because what he had with you was rooted in something real, something deep, something honest. And those kinds of connections, they don't come around often. They're rare and they're memorable. But here's the most important part of this whole thing. You don't need him to realize it for it to be true. His acknowledgement doesn't validate your worth. His regret doesn't define your value. You're not valuable because he regrets losing you. You're valuable because of who you were even while he still had you. Don't let his inability to say, I'm sorry, or I miss you, or I got it wrong, make you question the impact you had. You were the wake-up call. Whether he ever admits it out loud or not, he knows it. And he'll carry that lesson, that absence, that void with him. So if he never reaches out, if he never says the words you thought you needed to hear, it doesn't mean he didn't feel it. It means he wasn't strong enough to own it. And that's not your burden to carry. That's his path to walk. And trust me, he will walk it. Let him miss you in silence. Let your absence be louder than anything you could ever say.